I like to think of it as music, as a musician builds the score, that you really don't hear it too much, but it makes you feel a certain way. That's the way I think about cinematography. It just makes you feel a certain way, and you don't really know why.
Man in the High Castle, based on the novel by Philip K. Dick, is the story of what would have happened if Hitler had won. The series is set in 1962, 15 years after Nazi Germany and Imperial Japan have been victorious in the World War II of this alternate world.
He's got his left hand in his pocket. Do you know why? He's got Parkinson's. His hands shake like shit.
To bring this alternate world to life, the visuals of the show have to evoke a retro vintage feel that reminds us of the 60s, but also to make us uncomfortable, that we're in a nightmarish vision of our actual historical past. There's a balance. We should feel that this is surreal, a bad dream, but also that it's realistic, enough that we believe what we're seeing could have happened if just a few key events in history had gone the other way.
We all ready for the day ahead?
Yes, Father. Yes, Papa.
We talked to Man in the High Castle cinematographer Gonzalo Amat about how he achieves this balance of realism, history, and alternate world building through the camera and lighting.
What differentiates our project from others is the wide shot. If you see any of network TV specifically, they always think that people are going to be watching in small television, so they don't really do any wide shots. They keep everything super tight, everything's close-ups, you know?
Amat is passionate about bringing cinematic visual language to TV. That means following principles like saving close-ups for only the most crucial moments, and making sure camera movements have a purpose, motivated by the story.
For what the story needs, if we really want to sort of go in a specific way to create some mood, then we just keep the camera wide. And then we only save the close-ups for when it really needs it. So it has a lot more impact when you only use it for certain things instead of just doing everything in the close-up or medium shot like the TV does, you know? So that would be more cinematic. And it's just the fact we try to do some long sequences, with one shot. Also, I guess we move the camera with a reason. Sometimes in TV you see that people just put dollies and they move the camera left and right. We try to shy away from that. We move the camera when there's a reason to move it, either to create tension or either to move with a character or to show something that the character wants to see.
The show has 3 primary worlds. The Japanese Empire has taken over the west coast of the US, the German Third Reich occupies the east coast, and the Rocky Mountain states are a neutral buffer zone between the 2 empires. All 3 regions have a distinct visual feel, while tying into the unified alternate dimension of the whole series.
So there's a west coast, which is sort of run by the Japanese. That's it's probably a little warmer, still desaturated. There's lots of greens and sort of earth tones to it. The camera probably moves a little more. It's a little more organic. It's just kind of has that west coast feel. There's a lot more texture in the sets too. It's a little more run down. Opposite would be the Nazi-run east coast, which is, I would say there's basically no color. I would say it's black and white with touches of red, with the swastikas, with the banners, and just the skin tones. So, but it's not like we do anything to the actual treatment. We just shoot it like that. It's collaboration with art department and wardrobe. Also, the camera language is a lot more classic. It's more composed. That would be more architectural than the West Coast. Our image of what a German world would be run with, like a little more sober, if you want. So Kansas City is sort of the world in the middle. It's sort of what's left from the U.S., and there's no government, and it's frozen in time. That's frozen when the war, like 1945, when the U.S. supposedly loses the war. So all the cars are from there. There's no New York cars. The clothing's being worn for like 20 years, so it's all very desaturated, very kind of washed out. It's more rural, and for us it's based on a lot of like Hopper paintings and a lot of sort of that 1940s, 50s Americana. It's definitely nostalgic, and that feels kind of a sense of loss of. This is what's left of the U.S., so it's kind of sad, and it makes you sort of remember those great times of 40s and 50s as something that, what happened, we lost our identity when we lost the wars.
According to Ahmad, one of the show's distinguishing visual characteristics is its bold framing. Often, the exaggerated framing is supposed to make us feel uneasy, tense, or powerless, like we can't see everything that's going on. Always, Amat says they're trying to frame with a purpose, to say something with where they place the camera.
We try to not distract, but at the same time, some of our framing choices are pretty bold. So I would say almost every shot has a meaning, every angle on the show. Silhouettes, we do a lot of the choice where we put the light on the camera has to do with the framing. How much do we see of the world, and sometimes what we want to say about the character, if we want to be really close, uncomfortably close to a character. On the first episode, when Frank is in the prison, we have everything's so close, and it gives you a sense of compression. But there's a couple of wide shots when he's and it's just like so jarring because immediately you're like, oh, this looks like a different space. Sometimes we just put the camera on the eye level and you don't move the camera, but people will immediately concentrate on the content of the scene, for example. If you do something, you do the same, you put the camera lower and you show more background, and maybe you frame the character very close to the edge. The people will also get into the character, but they'll get a sense of uneasiness about it. It all has to do with the oppression and with the fact that the characters are uncomfortable in this world. We frame a lot behind characters, a lot of like symmetry and just a lot of very well composed frames, which also kind of gives you that sense of this world. And we always think about point of view of a scene, like whose characters telling the story. It's about connecting to the character. So if you're able to connect through what we do, through where we put the camera. When Joe is looking at the television, waiting to see where Juliana is. We have kind of a very long close-up of him, and it's just, it's sort of short-sighted, and we just hold it for a little longer than normal, so it's kind of interesting and uncomfortable in a way. It makes the world to be more like a coherent place when you have this language.
One of Amat's favorite scenes that he shot is the nightclub scene in Season 1, Episode 8. He says this scene exemplifies the cinematic visual language he's trying to achieve in the show.
A scene that's very much what we strive on the show. It's very atmospheric. It's sort of uncomfortable because it's, in a way, you're sort of going into this world and you don't really know where you are, but you're discovering things little by little. In terms of the lighting also, it's natural but stylized, which is also what we want in the show. I don't think it's very common that you see on television. So I think that it's a scene that we're proud of, and at the same time a scene that represents the sense of like a very cinematic scene from the show that doesn't really tell you a lot. It lets you discover.
Amat also loves the first episode of Season 2, The Tiger's Cave, because of the way the camera movement allows us to discover a new world through the character's eyes.
Juliana goes to a location and meets this very important character. In that scene, she goes out of a confined space. You don't know where you are. She wakes up and then she goes out into this kind of really interesting world that she never expected. And then just the way that we shot it, there's a crane shot that starts on her face and then pulls back, and we do like a literally 180. We end up seeing this huge location. It's kind of really interesting lighting and atmosphere. You see her reaction before the camera sees. So the audience immediately is like, what's going on? What is she seeing? And then you slowly reveal. We discovered with her, we discovered through her eyes, to this world through her eyes.
In Season 1, Episode 6, Amat's cinematography shows us how a scene with underlying tension and conflict can play even better if countered with bright, wholesome imagery.
There's this encounter with one of the sort of counter spies that goes to Smith's house. So there's a lot of tension because they're basically working for different fronts. But this scene happens in his house, so it's kind of very nice and warm. It's a beautiful house. It looks very like 1950s, very classic. So we try to make it a natural and very almost cheerful in a way. Some exterior days are just sunny and lush and beautiful, and the greens and all of that. So I think it really works sort of in counterpoint, like this very dark content, and you have this normalcy about the way the world looks that it just really feels creepy, like you have a little girl playing with a swastika flag, people immediately are jarred. You take like a image of like a normal Rockwell painting and you fill it with this content of something that's so dark that I think really works on people on an emotional level.
Every cinematographer has a different way of working. Amat takes his cues from the script and the actors to decide the mood and approach for how he's going to light and film each scene.
I personally like to work with a script when it comes to the mood of a scene. I talk to the actors a lot. I talk to Alexa. How do you see the scene? How do you see the tone of the scene? Even sometimes before the director joins in, I will ask them, how do you want to play the scene? Do you want to play it cheerful? Is it more contained for you? Are you threatened or not? And then by that, I'll also learn what I want to say. I want her to feel threatened, so I'll play against what she's playing, or I want to be on her side, so I'll play the threat and against the viewer also, you know. So it's kind of an interesting. It's all about subtext and storytelling.
A DP is also a visual storyteller, and as such, Amat's concerned with the deeper messages and intent of whatever he's filming. For him, the messages and themes of Man in the High Castle couldn't be more relevant in today's social and political world.
And I do think the show makes people think. Makes them reflect on what freedom is and does it mean to be an oppression. What's human nature, like what's the nature of a human beings, you know? I mean, what it would be to live in the 1960s Nazi world, you know? So it does, and what that did to everything. From the music, like what happened to rock and roll? Did it happen? Did it not happen? All the way to what people wear, all the way to the way people think, you know. Like in the case of John Smith, he participates in this in the Reich, but at the same time he's a family man. He loves his family, so it's like, you know, it's more complicated sometimes than just being black and white. So that's another thing that I think the show gives us, how to understand people.
Finally, we asked Amat which cinematographers have inspired him.
I think my top two would probably be Roger Deakins, because for me, he's very versatile and he is basically good at everything. Stylized, looks realistic, gritty, ugly, you know. It's good that you have a style, but at the same time, it's better if you let the story drive your style. And I think that's what Roger Deakins does so well. And for me, he's first a storyteller and then a cinematographer. And I tend to think myself the same way. The other one would be Chivo, Emmanuel Lubezki. He's amazing. For me, he's like the scientist of lighting and film, you know. I don't think anyone did beauty lighting like he did. If you look at like The Little Princess or Great Expectations or those movies. And but then he sort of got tired of that and went into let's just go and shoot with Alfonso Cuarón, which is amazing. Sort of the master of those long shots and those long sequence shots. So I think he's just experimenting all the time. I think that's sort of the way also that it's exciting to see that someone has so successful in his career that he's able to still keep himself out of the comfort zone. For me, that's priceless too, as a learning lesson from him, you know.